Hey, ding dongs.
Hello.
This is Jamie Kavanaugh.
This is Richard Lamb.
And this is Explain It to Jamie, the podcast in which Jamie gets some political explaining. So, are you ready to get into this, Richard?
I am ready.
For those of you that are joining us for the first time, I am Jamie, as I said, and I am a, how would you describe me, Richard?
I would describe Jamie as a curious and intelligent person who is interested in the world, but who doesn't have like a huge political and historical education in order to like make sense of the things that you read in an article you see, or something that your friend links
right
immediately.
That's a much more eloquent way of describing me than I would have.
What
I would have said sometimes I be smart, but most time I be dumb.
Oh.
And sometimes my dumb brain needs some smarting from my smart friend Richard.
It's like Cloud Atlas in here.
So Richard takes the time to explain to me in detail some of the more complicated political happenings in our world, as he is a total poli-sci nerd.
Yeah, but let's put this caveat at the front this time too. I like these things. I did do a degree in political science. However, I'm just like a normal dude, and I don't do this for my job, and I'm not gonna pretend I have crazy insider information that is not available to the average person. I just have like a lot of weird facts in my brains both of them.
Yeah.
Also, this one I'm holding in my hand.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna ask
that I use as a second brain. Squish. It came from a drifter. Don't tell anyone.
Okay, so our topic this week is electoral reform in Canada. Whoa!
Drop your panties, ladies.
Yeah,
it's happening.
It's time.
Shake your booty.
That's right. Time to talk about our old man, Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, and so
what's
Jamie,
he doing? What's he not doing?
Yeah, why do you want to have electoral reform explained to you, of all things?
Well, okay. Here's where I'm at. I think I wasn't happy with Stephen Harper.
No.
And he was prime minister for a long time.
Like 10 years.
And I also didn't really understand the math behind him always being prime minister, because it seems to me he didn't always get the votes that I thought he should get to be in charge of everything.
Right.
And so now I know a lot of people are jumping on Trudeau to hold up your promises about electoral reform. I myself am pushing for that, because I think proportional representation is important in our government.
Whoa,
yeah.
Yeah.
Look at that little term. Oh yeah, baby, I don't know nothing. And so I think I don't know everything about it, and by everything I mean almost nothing. But I'm sure that there's lots of people that are hearing this thrown around, that are getting on the bandwagon totally for it. That I think if we took some time to talk it through, educate fully, we might be able to drum up a bit more support for it.
Yeah.
But also a more quantified weapon. For it, of like, a more what's the word? Educated populace.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
You hear us, Justin Trudeau?
Yeah.
We're coming for you, man.
We're coming for you.
This podcast, this is it.
Yeah.
It's a sharpened spear of ideas. We're launching it at your idea brain.
Yeah.
This is not a real threat, CSIS.
Yeah, so disregard us.
Yeah, don't take the shot. We're just two dudes in a bachelor apartment talking into shoeboxes. All right, let's get into it.
Okay. Electoral reform. The system we have now, as I understand, is
it's first past the post. Very good, yes.
Which, as we all know, is both parties buy horses. They release them in the field.
Yeah, go on.
Towards a post.
Yes, a post, that's right.
First horse past the post.
Yes.
is the Prime Minister of Canada.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why,
Great.
Our thoroughbred Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, with his luxurious mane, enjoys the governmental majority that he enjoys today.
Perfect.
No,
See?
okay.
How hard could it be? Get rid of first past the post. It's old school and sounds made up.
Yeah, it is old school and it does sound made up.
Yeah.
But a lot of things about our democracy are old school and they sound made up, and that's kind of the whole point of electoral reform when we're really getting into it. So let's start from square one.
Right. So electoral reform. Let me take a real swing at this.
Sure. Yeah.
Is everybody votes for the person they want to be prime minister or the party rather, right? Kinda. Oh no. Okay, and let me just think back to my voting experience. Of like you go into your voting booth, you see who your representative is in your area.
Yeah.
You vote for them, and then the government does secret math, and they tell you Stephen Harper is prime minister again. Is that how it goes?
No.
Oh.
No.
Okay.
I mean, yes.
Right.
You're close. Everything you're saying is right, and yet nothing you're saying is correct.
Horrifyingly wrong.
Like nothing you're saying is technically wrong.
In a society who's allowed to cast a vote.
Like it's like you saying like a cat is a tiny scarf. Yeah. You could put it around you and it would keep you warm, and that's what a cat's for.
Right.
It's like you're not wrong.
Okay.
However, there are key elements of what a cat is that are missing from what you're saying.
Right.
Okay, so let's get into it right now.
Sure. Here comes a cough.
So okay. So let's get into it right now. Electoral reform is the idea that we need to change in Canada the way we elect governments. The system we use to vote for people to become our government and count those votes.
Right.
Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this is already the worst party I've ever been to, and I'm absolutely going to go home and watch Netflix because, I can feel my sexual organs drying up and blowing away in the baking hot sun of this lame-ass party.
Oh, yeah.
And while it's like a sexless topic to sort of start talking about, and it just sounds impenetrable and boring. Like, I actually think this is one of the most important issues we have in Canada for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. And the most important thing is, in politics today in North America, the most important thing to understand is that politics is not a game of convincing people, especially electoral politics. It's not a game of convincing people to vote for you. It's a game of making the people who are already going to vote for you actually show up to vote. Or rather, it's about energizing people enough that they get off their asses and they actually participate in democracy. And the most important thing in our country right now, and definitely in the States as well, is the number of people who are not politically engaged, right? There's this wonderful blog post from a blog called Notes on a Theory. It says the most important political topic is slack, right? And that's a word that political science people use to describe this huge group of people who are not engaged in their democracy. Slack. It's people who are not. There's so much slack in our democracy that any party that manages to energize more people who already like them are going to win. That's like where we're at right now.
Right.
People are super uninterested in democracy right now. I mean, in Canada, our elections for the last little while have been below 60% turnout, right? Just over half the people who can vote are actually voting, and almost half the people aren't voting at all.
Right.
Right? And people in Canada across the country feel as though their votes don't matter. Right? Mm-hmm. You hear this a lot. Your vote doesn't matter. If you're from a rural riding in Alberta, and you like the Liberals and you want to vote for the Liberal Party, you know your vote doesn't matter because the Liberal's not going to win your riding because a Conservative has won it for the last 900 years since before Canada was even a country. That's not true. Since for the last 150 years.
Not true. I myself am from Alberta, which actually I used to be like, I'm from this super conservative place. I'm kind of like swimming upstream in a lot of political conversations because I feel a sort of judgment. And when I okay, let me start that over.
Yep.
I'm from Alberta. I often found it very frustrating being there because my political views directly contradicted the popular political views of my area, and even beyond so, I often found myself voting for a party that I didn't necessarily align with.
Strategic voting.
Yes. Because they're the only people in the area that could beat the Conservatives.
And that's fucking cynical, right? Like, strategic voting is a cynical idea. Yeah. It's the idea that if you're not in Canada and you have never heard this term before, that's the idea that in Canada across this country, we have three major parties: the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, and the New Democrats, who are slightly more to the left than the Liberals. The Conservatives are right-wing party. That's right. The Liberals are a kind of centrist, milquetoast left-wing party. And then the NDP are the sort of social democrat, like slightly more left-wing party than the Liberals. And basically, every single riding in the country is a toss-up. It's a race between two of the three parties, right? So it's like either it's going to go to the Conservative or the Liberal. And then the NDP person only kind of siphons votes away from whoever that's going to be. So in many ridings, even say you support the New Democrats, even if you want the New Democrats to win, if the New Democrats don't have a good chance to win your riding, you might vote for the Liberals because you don't want the Conservatives, or vice versa, right? If you're super conservative and you live in the middle of downtown Vancouver, where the NDP wins a lot, or in the east side of Vancouver, you might want to vote for a Liberal if you don't want the NDP to win because they're like the lesser of two evils. And that kind of strategic voting is happening all over Canada. In fact, every election now, there are websites that could tell you how to strategically vote, or if your riding is a strategic voting riding, right?
That's right.
Which is just fucking horrible, because the point of a representative democracy, which is what we have, is that the people are in charge, and the people appoint people. The people vote for representatives who go to the legislature and represent their interests, right? When you were living in Alberta, you didn't have anyone to talk to who was your representative in government who was interested in hearing what you had to say.
Certainly not.
Right? The conservative people who represented you didn't have your interests at heart at all, and you knew that, right?
Yeah.
You knew that you couldn't go to your conservative MP and say, "Hey, I'm really concerned about the environment," or "I'm concerned about anything that has that are your values," because those people would be like, "Well, those aren't our values," and that guy literally doesn't represent you.
Yeah.
Right? That reality with strategic voting, with all these people who want representation in Parliament but don't get it, that happens because of our electoral system.
Okay.
So
why don't we get into this? So the electoral system we have, as described by you, is a cat scarf that we wrap.
It's a cat scarf.
So it is.
It's a full cat scarf.
First past the post. So why don't you clarify, if you can, beyond what I already made perfectly clear.
Hey!
Let's see if you can clarify what first past the post exactly is for those of us that weren't paying attention in grade 10 social studies.
And the best thing about the first past the post system, literally the best thing about it, I think, is that it's super easy to describe. It's very simple.
Great.
In the first past the post system, the country is divided into a certain number of zones that each have one person who represents them in the government. Right? The country is divided into 338 zones. Mm-hmm. Each of those zones has one person who goes and represents them in government.
Right.
And the way that you pick which person wins the election is it's whoever gets the most votes. Whoever gets the most votes in that zone wins the election. We call them ridings in Canada. So this is not a majority. It's called a plurality. It means the most votes. So if there's 100 people who vote in a district, and 90 and every single one of them runs for election, and everyone votes for themselves except one person votes for one other person, the person who gets
wins.
2 votes wins.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That's how that system works.
Right.
And that's why what happens is, okay, so one of the main features of this system is that it's a really stable system. What that means is it tends to give a lot of seats in Parliament to one party or maybe 2 parties. And those seats are usually vastly different from the percentage of the popular vote, like who voted for what, right? So it's possible to get like a crushing majority of seats in the Parliament, which means then that you can pass anything that you want to pass with like less than half of the actual votes in the country, right? Because if in every single riding you get 41% of the vote, and then the next party gets 40% of the vote, you win every single seat. Every single seat goes to you, even though you got you didn't get anywhere near 100% of the votes. You just got 100% of the seats, if that happens. These are extreme examples, but that is how the system works. Right? As long as you get one more vote than your opponents in any riding, you will win. And then you will be represented in government and your opponent will not be.
Okay. Pause there for a second. I got a question about just the competitive nature in me. Tends to look for hacks and cheats and stuff. Why is it seems to me it would be a good strategy to get a lot of like-minded people who are on your team to run as opposition members to steal votes. Why doesn't that happen?
So why isn't it like it's like the liberals and then like the mustache liberals who are like, we're not the liberals at all. I guess that would be fraud, I guess.
But is it? Because if you just go in and be like, I'm running as a liberal, I'm here to like distract votes from my opponent, really, like, who's to say whether you're a liberal or not?
Right. And you know what? That kind of thing, I don't think it happens like in a like Machiavellian way like that, where it's like, this is an evil plan where we've Trojan horsed in all of these people.
Right.
But partly because one of the features of our country, of Canada, is that we have really strong party discipline.
Right.
So in theory, each of those 338 people who make up our legislature, our House of Commons, are their own people, and they can any of them can propose a bill if they want to. They can vote however they want on each bill. In practice,
they tend to stick with their party.
They like absolutely stick with their party and almost never deviate from them. And there's even a person in each party called the whip, whose job it is to make sure everyone votes the same way.
Right, crack the whip.
Crack the whip.
Okay, great. So that's how we elect our House of Commons.
Yeah, that's right.
And the first past the post is whoever gets the most votes, period. So you don't have to get 50% of the vote, you don't have to get 30% of the vote, you just have to get
one more vote. One
else,
more vote
and you get
than
100% of the seats that are represented in your
riding, because there's only one seat, right? So that means the person who wins 100% of the representation in that riding. And the most important thing to understand about this is that means almost every time the party that wins the most seats gets a lot more seats than their votes. And that also means the third place party, because we have 3 main parties in Canada, gets actually way fewer seats than their share of the vote. So like if you get like 40, people have formed majorities in Parliament with 41 to 44% of the popular vote in Canada, right?
Right.
And then, the next closest can be like 30, like say the next closest party gets like 35% of the vote, but they can have like 20% of the seats with 35% of the vote, whereas the other party has 60% of the seats with 45% of the vote.
Right. And so I guess this is where the secret math for me starts to be a bit like, wait, what?
Right.
So what? So, and this is the problem. This is the issue.
This is the issue.
So what is so?
Well, here, and let me give another example too.
Yeah, give me an example.
One of the other features of this is that it's almost impossible to like create a new party or like be an independent. The only way a new party or a smaller party can gain power is if they have a really specific regional focus, right? Because if you appeal enough to like a specific region, you can win enough ridings in that region that you can get in power. So as an example, like a couple elections ago, the Bloc Québécois, who are like the Quebec sovereigntist party, they're only popular in Quebec, really. This was 2 elections ago.
Yeah.
They only run in Quebec.
Well, they got real specific branding.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be very interesting to see the Bloc de Quebec pop up in
that's the
Yukon.
thing. But they have no interest in that, right?
Yeah.
But they're an only Quebec party, and in the federal legislature, like the Canadian legislature, they got 18% of the vote, the popular vote, because they in Quebec, and they got like 20% of the seats in the legislature. The NDP that year got 16% of the vote and like 10% of the seats.
Right.
Right. So the Bloc Québécois had 2% more vote than them and like double the power.
Right.
And that's weird, right? Like that's weird.
That's weird. That's secret government math.
That's secret government math.
Right.
That's how it happens.
Okay, great. That's because I always find that's the part I find most frustrating.
Yeah.
And so so that's the issue.
Yeah.
Right. And so why? Because Justin Trudeau in a big way ran on electoral reform. I thought it seemed to me I was activated by it. You know, a lot of people I knew were activated by it. Because I don't like this weird math.
Right.
And so, why is he pulling back now?
There's a very common campaign promise for electoral reform. Stephen Harper even proposed a form of electoral reform his first time.
Oh, what a great guy.
Yeah, I know. I love that guy. What is he up to now?
I don't know.
He's probably like staring at a wall. He's probably staring at a beige-colored wall in his fucking house in Calgary, drinking a completely room temperature glass of water with no...
I like to think that he and his wife speak only in binary.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Stephen Harper's favorite hobby is to sit in a mirror and watch his own hair grow. Like that's what he's doing right now, and he's the happiest person on earth, probably. He's figured it out. Like, he's happy sitting and, like, thinking about the color of paint that's on a wall directly facing across from him. Yeah. And he's like, zen content.
Right.
We're the fools.
We're the fools.
Also, his band was awesome.
Yeah. Boy, oh, boy. What were they called? Like
the Van Cats.
The Van Cats.
Which is... Because the prime minister's address, I can't even believe I'm explaining this. I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna like finish this podcast, punch myself, and take my own lunch money after this. Because the address of the prime minister in Ottawa is 24 Sussex Drive, and 24 in French is 24. Yeah. And so the Van Cats is like a horrible anglicization of the number 24, which is actually kind of appropriate for Stephen Harper, like the fact that he would mangle a French word as his shitty band.
It really reminds me of that Simpsons episode where Homer and the boys start the a cappella group.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's a name that's funny the first time and gets less and less funny every time you saying it.
Yeah.
The Van Cats was number 2.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It was almost Homer's barbershop quartet name.
That's right.
Yeah, so often governments promise electoral reform because electoral reform is a way for people who feel unrepresented to have a chance to be represented. Mm-hmm. That's the promise of electoral reform, that the way that we all interact with our government and our politics will fundamentally change when the people who are allowed into government change. Right. But then the thing is, any government that gets into power
doesn't want to do electoral
because they got into power from first past the post. That system put them in power, so they always pivot away from it. That's always happened.
Right. Here's something I've been thinking about lately that I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, is this a good reason not to? I understand. The Liberals got in on electoral reform, or they got in on electoral reform, and then once they're in. So a part of me can see the value in not going through with it, if for no other reason than like what's going on down south is horrifying and scary, and I could see how you would want to hold on to power as best you can.
But here's the thing.
Yes.
What's going down south is horrifying and scary, and yes, I understand why a government would want to be stable in that time. The thing is, what's going on down south happened because they have a non-proportional system.
Right.
And dear God, if you're listening to this, Can
you imagine if God was listening to
God? He is. I mean, everything I know about God says that she is. Clearly, I know nothing about God. Oh my God!
I think the fact that you used 3 different gender pronouns to speak about it says you know quite a bit about God. Anyway, okay, what's God saying?
So, like, if the listener, if you were listening to this, know that this hideous political debacle happening down south with the Donald Trump administration happened because America has a non-proportional system, and because there was horrible turnout in their elections, right? A system that makes people exhausted and makes people not want to even show up and vote means that it can be hijacked by a minority, right? When you factor in the fact that Donald Trump brutally lost the popular vote by like 2.8 million votes, and the fact that 60% of the American electorate showed up to vote at all, the actual number of people who voted for Trump is like 25% of America. 25% of people determined the next 4 years, and like the reason we're watching this ghoul show is because they have an unfair system, and that's like one of the worst case scenarios of our system. But we're not far from that.
Right.
Our turnout is bad enough that like one gross idiot who gets enough, like who gets a plurality, right? Who gets one more gross idiot than the non-gross idiots to vote for them. And suddenly we're looking at the same shit, right? Like that's the danger. And that's why our country and our democracy is at risk, because it's sick, right? The turnout numbers are like a disease. It's like immune system is bad.
Right. I just want to say, if there was any doubt that this is like that this is totally partisan, let it be like stricken with the amount of times that Richard called people gross idiots.
Gross idiot is in the Constitution Act of 1867. You can look it up.
Right.
Charles Tupper insisted that gross idiot be put in.
Oh, I love it.
Google it.
Fucking
peons.
I love it. Yeah.
No, you're not.
You're not peons. Unless we're all peons, and that's our power. So okay, great. Okay, well, I had a feeling, because I was like, benefit of the doubt. What's the reason? What's the argument for not?
Yeah.
And that was the only thing I could sort of muster.
The
up.
other arguments
and I figured it was probably a shaky one.
Here are the other arguments for not, just so that no one says I'm being unfair.
Yeah.
Gross idiots of the world.
Yeah,
I see
gross
you.
idiots.
I see you in your Cheeto shirts. Okay, so the main arguments for it are, we have this system now and it works. Why change it? The answer, my follow would be, no, it doesn't work. It's slowly bleeding us to death, putting us at risk of a horrible demagogue taking over and a minority of people in this country electing into power a government that vastly does not represent us. That risk is real, and if you don't think it's real, just turn on the news and like witness the macabre carnival happening right to our south. That could happen here. It could absolutely happen here. And then one of the other things that people say about it is the positive, I would say the most positive thing about First Past the Post is that it's stable. So it elects governments that have a majority that can do stuff and reduces conflict and deadlock in the legislature. And in a country that's as big and diverse as Canada, that stability is, many people think it's an important feature. In fact, a lot of people think the First Past the Post system is what's holding the country together, right? Because Canada, if you let too much diversity into the parliament, then nothing's ever going to get done. The artificial stability of the First Past the Post system is important.
Okay.
To that, I would say that's not true. I would say that it is a stable system, but it has a flatlining effect on policy, because in order to appeal to everyone across the country, parties have to be really bland, right? They have to appeal to a huge amount of people, and so they kind of stand for nothing. And in the 19th century, when we confederated and picked this system, politics were really different than they are now. Parties weren't the same as they are now. Back in the day, it was a fact of life that parties would disagree, but they would find places to collaborate. And in fact, it was also a fact of life that multiple parties would have to work together to govern, which is not, we don't have coalition governments in Canada almost ever, really rarely.
Right. There was a fight for it a number of years ago.
That's right. We
NDP
almost
and
had
the
it.
Liberals.
That's
right.
right. Well, no, it was when Stephen Harper won with like a really bad mandate. There was a thought that the NDP and the Liberals combined had so many seats in Parliament that they could defeat his budget, and then that they could hold a no confidence motion. A budget is also a confidence motion, which means that if a minority parliament doesn't have the confidence of the legislature anymore, they have to have an election. So we were in a situation where we had to have another we could maybe be forced to have another election like 4 days after our election happened. Right. And there was the thought that to prevent that from happening, the Governor General, who's the Queen's representative in Canada, the head executive of Canada, could have said, okay, even though the Conservatives technically they won the most seats in Parliament, so they have the Prime Minister and stuff, we're actually going to take that away and give it to a joint coalition of the NDP and the Liberals. And there was a big push for that to happen from a lot of people, but it didn't happen.
Okay.
The Conservatives just kept running the country.
I do want to get into like alternatives, but first I'd like to talk a bit about like who else in the world has a first past the post government. Are there any other examples of it?
Yeah, there are, like America does.
The States has a first past the post as well.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's how their
I thought it
system
was
works.
something. Oh, but what's the difference? Ours is parliamentary, and theirs is.
Yeah, they have. Well, theirs is their own system.
Right.
The thing is, they have the Electoral College, right?
Okay.
So what happens is there's a first. Well, no, I guess they don't have a first past the post system. They have the Electoral College. System.
Score one for Jamie.
So what it is though is it's first past the post in each state.
Yeah.
And then whoever for the president, whoever wins that state wins that state's electoral college votes. So you have to do a combination, like it's like a combination thing, right? So all the states are weighted differently, but in each of those, so like all the states are of different importances for winning the presidency, but in each of those states, it is a first past the post race, right? Like, it's important to note too, there's a difference between a first past the post system where a plurality system where you just have to get the most votes, the states has that, versus a majority system. In France, when the presidential race has a majority system, which means that you cannot be elected the president of France until you win like 51%. 50% plus one. And the way they do that is they have multiple presidential elections where they keep knocking people off who fall below a certain amount so that you're forced to vote for fewer and fewer people until somebody gets 50%. Right. So everyone in the country votes multiple times for the president before or that president is elected. Right? So that's a majority system.
Right. And Britain also has first past the post as well.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into alternatives. So
okay.
What are better options?
Okay, so the
we just talked about France's system, which we like.
Yeah, it's an interesting system.
It's an interesting system. I've heard a lot of up talk about Germany's system.
Yeah, so
and Israel's system.
So here's what's important. The buzzword here that you hear a lot is proportional representation.
Yeah.
And what that means, all that means is it's a system that tries to more closely match the popular vote to how the seats are distributed between the parties, right? So you trying to move away from a system in which somebody can win really few votes but have tons of seats, right? And you're trying to just make things match up more evenly, right? There's all kinds of different ways to do this. The most common alternatives are what's called a list system. And then the other one is the STV, the single transferable vote system. So these are kind of the two major proportional systems. And then there's lots of like steps in between these systems and lots of ways you can put these systems into action.
Customize them.
Yeah, and let's be clear here too. There's like some real beautiful nerds who like can tell you everything about the different effects that the different steps and stuff can have in the math, right? I'm not one of those nerds. I have ultimate respect for them. But if you want to talk to us about like that one weird place in Germany that has like its own proportional system, or like the more like mathy nerdy systems, I'm not really going to get into those. I'm going to get into the very major clear alternatives.
Yeah, luckily, and believe it or not, I am one of those nerds.
Yeah, that's right.
I can tell you.
Jamie pulls off his masks and he just looks like a nerdy version of Jamie.
Yeah, can you imagine a nerdy version of Jamie? Boy, so let's get into it.
Okay,
what's the list system?
The list system is a system in which parties make a list of people who are running for them, right? And then, like say when we all in a completely pure list system, there's no ridings. Okay, so there's no more person who represents you. There's just the whole country. The parties will make a list, right, of people who they want to sit for them in order. So like first person is Justin Trudeau for the Liberal Party. The second person is, his second in command, right? And then it goes down the list and the party will pick who's on the list.
Right.
Then when you show up on election day, you vote for a party. You're like, I want the Conservatives, the Liberals, or the NDP. You vote for one. Yeah. This is a pure list system, pure closed list. So say you vote for Liberals, whatever. You put your vote in on election day. You count it up. You look at the popular vote. If the Liberals got 60% of the votes, they get 60% of the seats. So let's just say for the sake of easy math, say there's 100 seats. Yeah. That means the Liberals get 60 seats. So the first 60 people on their list all get in.
Yeah.
right? That's how a list system works. So then the Conservatives win 20, the first 20 people in the Conservatives all get in. Right. And then the same with the NDP or whatever.
Okay.
That's a list system. And the example I said is 100% proportional, right? Now, we're going to start mix and matching. So one alternative is that you can use a list to just balance out a first past the post system. So let's say you take our system right now, right? We have 338 ridings. They're all kind of a fixed size based roughly on how many people live in them, right? So let's say immediately you just cut it in half, the number of ridings. So you make each riding twice as big. Now there's half as many ridings. And so when we go out on election day, we all vote the same way we do now for first past the post for a person. But then when you cast a vote for a person, you also cast for a party. And then you fill the other half of the legislature with proportional seats from a list.
And that's how Germany is.
That's right. The German system fills the Senate, like the second house, with proportional people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Great.
Right. So that's one way to do it.
And
that helps equal it out. Now, there's problems with this idea too. And one of the problems is you lose regional representation a little bit, or like weakens the fact that like you have a person who's your person who has some kind of connection to your neighborhood or your area where you live and is able to go back and forth between you and be your person in the government.
Right, because you're just picking, like they just pick the first 30 people on the list or whatever.
Yeah, those people could come from anywhere.
Be from anywhere.
Right. Now, there's so that's one of the weaknesses of the list system. And the list system works in, like, a lot of European countries have it, but a lot of European countries are a lot smaller than Canada. And also Canada's a federation, and a lot of European countries aren't a federation. And what that means is, this is an idea that you're going to think is so basic that you can't even believe there's a word for it, but there is. It's that provinces are kind of their own thing inside a larger country. That's what a federation is. Right, like America is also a federation. Right, it's like states control their own stuff, some things inside of the country.
Right,
and so because of that,
political system in Star Trek is a federation.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's
Star Wars, it's also a federation.
No, it's an empire.
An empire.
Yeah, that's different.
Right.
That's what they have now.
Isn't the rebellion fighting for a federation, or wasn't it a federation?
A republic. They wanted a republic, but that just means like ruled by the people.
Right.
Yeah.
We're on those guys' team. So
yeah.
Down with the empire.
You know what? If I had to choose a side in Star Wars, I suppose I finally have to come out and say I would support the rebels.
You know, some people would disagree with you.
Who would disagree with me?
I'll bet Steve Bannon would disagree with you.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
That Steve Bannon looks like a hut.
He looks like the Force is slowly eating away at his body.
Steve Bannon looks like you took like a gummy version of a person, left it in swamp water for like several months and just engorged with like bacteria and twigs and like frog eggs, and then you put a horrible Gap hoodie on it and just let it deport Muslims from America.
Yeah. Boy, what an idea. Okay, so we're a federation, which means the provinces can act individually within the country.
And people have strong ties to what region they live in, like Quebec. Like Alberta has a really strong provincial identity, right?
Yeah, baby.
The East Coast, the Maritimes provinces, they have their own very strong provincial identities, and people don't want to weaken that, right? And so having fewer ridings weakens regional representation. That's one of the trade-offs.
Right. What are the benefits to it?
The benefits are that you finally have a representative that can speak for you, right? Mm-hmm. So even if the person elected in your riding doesn't is the Conservative Party. Let's say you're Jamie in high school again. You voted for the Liberals, let's say.
And what a nightmare.
Yeah, oh God, yeah. I'm sending you back to high school.
No!
You have an erection all the time and you don't know why.
Oh, please, God, don't make me do it again. Oh, man.
Once was enough.
Once was enough.
No, but so let's say you're Jamie in high school. There's a Conservative in your riding, right? But even if you go to the ballot box and vote Liberal, that helps get a Liberal into the parliament because they're appointed off the list of the popular vote, right? And so then so your vote's not wasted anymore. That's the most important thing about that.
Great.
Right.
Yeah.
It's also worth saying there's what's called open lists, which means that remember in a closed list, which is the first list I said,
the party makes the
and they go
list.
In order.
Yeah.
Right. In an open list, you can specifically vote for somebody on the list out of order. So you get 2 votes. You can vote for whoever's in your riding, and then you vote on the list. And you can either just be like Liberal Party, I don't care who it is. But if you're like, I like the sixth guy on the Liberal Party more than the first guy, you can just cast a vote for the sixth guy. And if the sixth guy gets like above a certain amount, which is a threshold. Thresholds are used a lot in proportional systems. So it's like if they get more than X votes, which is usually like some percentage of the number of people voting, then that person goes to the top of the list. That person gets elected out of order. So that's another way that you can make it a little more democratic, so the party doesn't just choose every person, which is like a little scary, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But okay, that's fair enough. But as you said, that could encourage more parties to come up versus just 3.
Exactly, right. Because in that point, what happens is
that would combat that.
Yeah, so you could create a party where even if you didn't win a single riding, right, in the old school way, if you had enough of the popular vote, again, there's a threshold. So if you create a party, you have to get, sometimes it ranges to between, usually 2% to 10% of the popular vote in order to start appointing people from the list. Once you have it up to 10%, it's actually not very good anymore, and you start wasting a lot of votes again. And 2%, like Italy's is 1%, and Italy has a really unstable parliament where like there's tons of crazy parties.
Right.
I think it's 1%. Somebody, tweet me angrily if I'm wrong about that. Maybe it's 2. Anyway, so generally you find them between 2% and 10%.
Right.
So if you created a party, you didn't win a single riding, but 7% of the people voted for you, you get seats. Those people didn't waste them.
What would I have had to have said to get 7% of people to vote for me?
Yeah.
Like,
that's right.
I don't know, free McDonald's. free booze.
Free McDonald's.
Yeah, the free booze party.
Free
That's
booze
me.
McDonald's party for Jamie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. What a dream. People would vote for that.
Yeah. But the thing is, though.
Yeah.
Maybe people would vote for that, but this is my hope, is that in those systems, that's less of a joke.
Right.
Somebody who just says a bunch of, like, people often worry that proportional systems can let extremist parties in. Yes, they can. And that, for me, is an incentive for everyone to pay the fuck attention to what is happening.
Right.
That's the most important thing. I want, this is a Richard thing now.
Let's take the training wheels off this motherfucker.
Exactly. I want a system that has less slack. I want a system that is riskier, because that will make parties that more clearly define the actual positions people have in real life and the actual things that people are interested in. And then also that will make, there are consequences,
right?
To not paying attention to an election. There are consequences to ignoring it. And your vote will not be wasted. Your vote will help somebody. So, I think that it's a little bit more of a serious system that engages more people because it has risk.
Okay. So that's the list system. Then we have the STP system. STV
Yeah.
system. So
STV stands for single transferable vote, and I will say up front, I've always liked this system the best. I think it's an awesome system. And we've come so close so many times to having it in different places in Canada and never quite made it. And I'm always disappointed in that, but I have hope that we will vote for the system one day.
Okay.
Currently, there's only 2 countries in the world that use it. One of them is Ireland. They use the STV system. And actually, in a few places in Canada, in the 20s, between the 20s and the 50s, they used the STV system, including in Alberta. But they got rid of it because it was more politically advantageous to the parties in power to have first past the post.
Right.
So in the STV system, there's no list. You have ridings again, right? Yeah. The ridings are bigger, and each riding has more than one member, right? So in our system right now, you elect one person for your zone. That person goes to the government, right? So the party that wins that seat wins your whole riding. In the STV system, there can be between 3 and 5 seats per riding. Right? So each party nominates 5 people for your riding. So your riding could elect 5 liberals, or it can elect 2 liberals, a conservative, an NDP, and like a Jamie McDonald's booze party person, right?
Yeah, running in 2020.
Yeah. Keep an eye out. Yeah. Watch your Facebook, everybody.
Yeah. If only we could get Justin Trudeau to overthrow this stupid electoral system.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Jamie Booze McDonald's party is coming at you.
The people want it, JT. Yeah. This is what the people want. You think they don't want electoral reform? People love McDonald's and booze.
try me. Just give it a shot, Justin.
I dare you to go, Justin. Justin, I'm just speaking to you right now, baby doll. Justin, I dare you to go to the McDonald's on Queen Street in Spadina in Toronto at 2 a.m. and yell, "Who here wants McDonald's booze party to run in the 2020 Canadian general election?" And I dare you to tell me Canadians do not want electoral reform, Justin. I dare you.
Yeah, we both dare you.
Justin.
Double dog dare you, Justin.
Justin, we triple dog dare you. Why don't you surf about it, you beautiful fucking man?
Yeah.
You fucking dreamboat.
Oh my God, he is a baby. Yeah.
He's a handsome dude. I met him like really soon after he got elected the leader of the Liberal Party, and I was enchanted.
Yeah, he's tall, good looking.
Firm handshake.
Firm handshake. He can box, as we know.
Oh yeah, he beat the shit out of another MP once.
Yeah, that was like, I was thinking about that today of like, what if he lost? If he lost, would he actually be our prime minister right now?
You know what? He'd probably be a bouncer at a strip club, which is what that other MP is doing.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
He was never mighty. Justin, he lost the boxing match to Justin Trudeau.
Oh, my God. What high stakes. You know, put your, like, is it for a politician to go in and box somebody? Like, that's... You know, people are going to judge you on that, whether you win or lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want, like, I don't want my political system to be decided by who's going to win in a boxing match, but I understand that if I'm running for prime minister and I'm going to go into a boxing match a couple years ahead of time,
yeah,
you better win.
You don't want that thing on YouTube. You don't want that video of you crying and puking, like in your red little shorts on YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, I would want that video, but not Justin Trudeau doesn't want it.
Certainly no.
My sexual habits are my own. Thank you.
Yeah, stick to yourself.
Yeah, listen. Hey, why are you asking me all these personal questions about my puking video?
Nobody asked you. Nobody.
All right, okay, I'll talk more about it if you twist my arm. No, okay.
Okay, we got. Okay, let's get back
to
the
SDV system.
Yeah, SDV.
In the SDV system, there's multiple seats in a riding. Mm-hmm. Each party nominates the number of people. A number of people equal the number of seats. So if there's 5 seats, you nominate 5 people.
In your party.
Each party, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they up to 5 people. There's no reason not to. They might do, I don't know, whatever.
Might do 2.
Yeah.
If
they can't find 5 people or something. Whatever. And then when you go to vote, you rank them in order, the people that you want, right? So if you like a Liberal guy a lot, but you don't like the other 4 Liberals, but you do like the other NDP, you go literally number 1, this Liberal, number 2, this NDP guy, number 3, this other NDP guy, and you can rank as many or as few as you want.
Okay.
Right? Up to 5. So then the way that they pick who wins.
Oh, okay. So you could put them in like I like this Liberal guy, I like this NDP guy, certainly not this conservative.
Yeah, and if you only like 2 people, you can only put 2 people. Like you don't have to vote. You don't have to pick 5 votes.
Right.
Then when they count the votes, the way they pick who wins is anyone who gets more than a certain number that has to do with the number, like 1/5 of the votes in the riding gets elected. Right. So, and then what happens? So there's a threshold. Again, that's the threshold. So let's say it takes 1,000 votes to get elected. So let's say they tally up all the votes. One person has more than 1,000 votes, but nobody else does yet. Then they look at that person who has who has more than 1,000 votes, and they take those people's second choice. The people who voted for that guy first. Like first, they mark everyone's first choice. That's the first count they do. Like if we look at everyone's first choice, is it all sold? Did 5 people get more than 1,000 votes, and all 5 of those people are elected, and this is done, right? Because all the seats are filled, right? But so let's say only one guy got elected. Only one guy passed 1,000 after they count the first choices. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So then then they go to those people's second choices.
So all the people that voted for that guy number 1,
yeah,
they go back to all those ballots. So like if he gets 1,000 votes, they go to those 1,000 people that voted for him number 1,
and then they look at their second choices.
And they look at their second choices.
Yeah, but
they disregard everyone else's.
No, here's the trick.
Okay.
So they actually look at say he gets 1,200 votes. He has 200 extra votes, right? They look at those 200 people's extra votes. Now the question is, how do they pick which 200 people, right?
That was going to be my next question.
They take all 1,200 people and then divide each of their second choices so that it equals 200 total. So they take a little percentage of your second choice, and that total is 200 votes in total. And then they split those up among the second choices, right? And then they look at, if nobody still won, then they look at the next person's second choices, the next closest person. And so then what they're doing is anyone who wins, they look at those people's second choices, right? So that, and they keep doing that all the way down the ballot until 5 people are elected.
Okay.
Right? So in this system, you will have voted for somebody who gets in. That's the theory. And because of that, in your region, you will have somebody who represents your interess.
Right.
Right?
Oh, I understand.
You have somebody who you voted for.
Ooh, I mean, I like. Maybe it's just the enthusiasm with which you're describing it to me, but I like the sound of it. The part that I'm like a bit wary of is that sounds more like more secret government math.
It is, and the math is the thing. Like I said, we've almost had SDV so many times. The math is the thing that always kills it, because people, honestly, again, dumb demagogues make people afraid of the math. And the math makes people feel stupid, and it's a bit tricky to explain. So the people who are explaining SDV don't do a good job explaining the math.
Right.
And then the people...
Whether on purpose or by accident.
By accident, usually. And then the dumb people who don't want change are like, see, they can't even explain the math.
Okay, so of the countries in the world that have proportional representative government, what proportion... Are they all built on STV and list?
Yes, for the most part, yes. I mean, there are like small other systems in use. Like there's this one crazy system in this one region in Germany where there's like you elect people sort of normally, and then there's a proportional part of the legislature that's populated from the people who almost won.
Right.
Like, and that's a lot of crazy math, right?
Sure.
But for the most part, there's like about 90 countries in the world that use some kind of list, some form, or a mix with a list. And then there's only 2 real countries that use full STV, Malta and Ireland, right? And then some of the elections in New Zealand, and also all the European Parliament elections and stuff like that have STV.
Okay, great. So those are some options outside of our first past the post system.
Those are the 2 main options.
I want to bring it back to something we touched on earlier, which is voter turnout. Okay. So you cite that as one of the major issues in any election.
That's one of the biggest problems we have.
Why don't we make it illegal not to vote?
Well, there's a lot of questions about this.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a horrible idea, but people are like, do you really want people to show up to vote because they have to? Like, is that really a good option? Is like if you find people, like in Australia, they fine people if they don't vote, and Australia has over 90%, 95% turnout in every election, I think. Right. But do you want to run the risk of people like just showing up on election day, not knowing anything about anything, and voting? That's kind of the risk of that. Like, do you want to force people to show up when they don't want to show up? I mean, maybe in Canada, when I think of what my problems with voter turnout, which is like it makes democracy vulnerable to take over by a minority if that minority is more energized than the lazy majority. And then also, that then the political culture is more interesting, more engaged, and represents people more. Finding people to vote sort of protects against a demagogue, but it doesn't help democracy. And like that's really what it comes down to for me, is that yes, I want the democracy to be protected against a Donald Trump. I never want that to happen here if we can help it. But I care a lot more about true diversity being represented in our government, because we are a very diverse country. And like Justin the fuck Trudeau said, diversity is our strength. Well, guess what, motherfucker? You're correct, and our government should reflect that. Like, it is not scary at all to me for there to be more parties and more voices in government, even if that means less stability, because our country is a long and noble history of people in government with different viewpoints collaborating together on things that they massively disagreed about many things, and yet found ways to agree on very important things when it came time. People fought so hard for responsible government in Canada, which is literally just the concept that the people we elect can make changes in our country that can't be just struck down by the Queen and the royalty. Like, people fought for decades to get responsible government in Canada in the 19th century, and now it's withering away in front of us, right? Like, we need to protect our democracy, and that means no more like, if we can get rid of wasted votes and get rid of strategic voting, so that finally when you're showing up on election day, you know that at least your vote will matter. Like, your vote will help someone get put in parliament, and that means that person is accountable to you on some level, and that if they don't represent you, you will not give them that vote next time, and then they could be out, and that's how they're accountable to you, and that's how democracy is supposed to function, right?
Right.
That's why we need an overhaul, because we're losing that. We're seeing it dwindling before our eyes.
Okay, great. I think I've learned a lot. One more question I have is, because I certainly, I understand, and I don't think me and Richard pretend not to be like bleeding heart liberal fellas. Is it because I foresee this coming out and seeing quite a bit of opposition, potentially on the right side, side of our government. Why is this also good for our conservative brothers and sisters to consider?
Well, back when I was actually a liberal, like, I had a card, I was a real capital L liberal.
Literally a card-carrying
liberal. I was knocking on doors for Chrystia Freeland, and I remember I knocked on the door. I said, I'm visiting from the Liberal Party, and the guy's like, it's okay, thanks. I said, fine. I gave him the postcard telling him when the by-election was. I left, and then he opened the door and came down the hallway, and he was like, you know what? I would vote for the Liberals, except they're not, like, I agree with almost everything Liberals have to say, except I'm Catholic, and they don't stand where I stand on moral issues, which was his code for abortion. Right. And he's like, if there was a party that was like the Liberals but opposed abortion, that guy would vote for it. He didn't want to vote for the Conservatives, but they were the only party where he even slightly had a chance to, like, express his opposition to abortion. Now, we talked about this last episode. We're both super pro-choice people, but like, and I truly think it's an unpleasant opinion to be against abortions and to want to force women to have pregnancies. But I do understand why someone would have that opinion, especially if you're Catholic. You have the right in Canada to have a religion and to have political opinions that come from that religion, even if I disagree with those. Right. Those people don't have a party right now, too. But under a proportional system, they could, right? Now, that's risky for people who are pro-choice like us. Like, is there, like, a party that's anti-abortion could win seats in Parliament, right? But then you got to show up, and make sure that they don't. Or for those people who do believe that, then they have a representative in the government, and maybe that representative is in the minority, because I truly do think that's a minority opinion in Canada. But if that's a minority opinion in Canada, it'll be in the minority in government.
Right. So I'm gonna pull you back to the question of, like, why should conservatives want proportional?
Because conservatives in Canada have one party to pick from, and it's almost completely certain that party does not represent all of what you believe. Right. If there are 3 or 4 conservative parties, you're way more likely to have something that actually represents what you think about the world and how you think the world should be run. And then if you put that party in power, they can make deals with the other conservative parties to run together. You'll get some of what you want, and you'll have to compromise some to the other parties. But I think that a political world with more opinions that are clearly defined. Right now we have 3 parties, really, nationally. If we had even 6 parties nationally, like, that would be a lot more energizing, right? Because you'd be
allow bigger, wider spectrum of things to vote for.
And I think
so
then
you're not just voting for red or blue.
You're voting for all kinds of stuff that aren't part of the conversation right now, and that means, I think, more energy too. You get behind your people because those people actually do represent you, right? And then our democracy is healthier. That's what I think.
Great. Holy shit! I learned a lot.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, Jamie, you want to try it? Let's try. Should we try a wrap up here? Like, you want to try? Let's hear, in Jamie's words, a summary of some of the things you've learned today.
Oh, dear God. Yeah, we felt like this was probably a good idea to prove that I was listening and not just like phoning in questions for Richard to bat around while I was in another room, like playing StarCraft.
Yeah.
So okay, what have I learned? We have first past the post
Right.
system. I knew that, but I have a clearer idea of what it is. In that our country is split into 338 ridings, 338 ridings. In each riding, you're voting for an individual, and that person just needs to win by one vote.
That's right.
To get a seat in Parliament.
That's right.
So they don't need to win by a majority. They just need to win by one vote to get 100% of one seat in our House of Commons.
Correct, yes.
The party that gets the most seats, their leader is then the Prime Minister.
That's right.
The reasons that is that we have it, that it's good, is that it's really stable.
Right.
The reasons that it's not really great is it's kind of stagnant and makes us choose red or blue, like and also makes the parties kind of beige in their opinions and choices.
Yeah.
It also makes it easy for. No. Let me go back to that. Now the different things that we potentially have a proportionally representative government is a list system and an STV system. List system being the party in a pure list system. The party makes a list of X number of candidates.
It would be 338 if they were still
338 candidates. You vote for parties, and proportional to the amount of votes, you get that many candidates in a party. So if a party gets 60% the vote, 60% of 338 candidates gets put in the House of Commons. The alternative proportional representative government system is the STV system, in which you have in each riding you have like 5 candidates or a number of candidates. Every party puts forward that number of candidates, and then you get to vote for specific candidates in that riding in order of which you'd like them in. Then comes secret government math,
right?
In which the person who gets past the threshold, you then go into the people who voted for him or her, and see the next person they voted and assign seats that way.
Right.
The downside to that is that it's got government math and it's like kind of boring and hard to explain, and so that's like scary for us plebeians. But the benefit is you get regional representation, which the list system you don't kind of get, and also everybody's accountable. It also opens up both proportional representative systems open up for more parties with more ease than our current first past the post system. Is this? Am I on track?
Jamie, you sound like a fucking genius.
Dude, you know what's amazing?
Jamie, you're gonna get booked on CBC like Power and Politics tomorrow.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna go out to the bar tonight and be like, guys, no, we need is proportional representative government.
Dude, that was awesome. Everything you said is correct. Boom. Everything you said is correct.
And of course, one of the biggest things blighting our electoral system is voter turnout.
Yeah.
And so get out and vote. When the next opportunity arises, get out and vote. Educate yourself. Energize yourself. Energize the people around you.
Yeah.
And let your opinions be heard.
I'm going to take just a hot moment here to encourage everyone to check out a website called votebetter.ca, which is run by a group called Lead Now, who are, to my knowledge, right now the clearest proponents of electoral reform in Canada. They're the kind of organizing group right now that's really putting a lot of pressure and trying to build their capacity to pressure the government to really fulfill this promise. They promised this was going to be the last election. If you want a fucking perfect example of how our current system is not accountable, the fact that they feel like they can just bail on that promise is a great example of how they don't need to appease people anymore because they're going to still get votes. The Liberals will still get votes even if they lie to us to our fucking faces and bail on their promises. So Let's keep him accountable. Let's get a system of government that represents us.
Also, I signed I think a House of Commons petition literally today, and we'll put that.
Yeah, we'll put that on
that in the description of this. So if you're on SoundCloud or Facebook or Twitter, you can just get that real easy. Yeah.
Call Justin and tell him that even though sometimes when his picture comes up on your newsfeed, you get lost for 5 to 22 minutes in his eyes, thinking of a fantasy scenario in which you and he teaches you how to like wind sail, and it's like the movie Ghost, where like his hands are on your hands and you're like sailing together above like the boreal forest, and Justin's like, "Don't worry, it's okay," and you're like, "I don't know, Justin, it's really high," and he's like, "Hey, don't worry, I've got you." And you just feel his hands gently taking your hands and guiding you on the currents of wind, as together as one being you soar. And tell him, even though you have that fantasy, you still want electoral reform.
And very vivid and specific.
hypothetical fantasy
and
you might
thought
have.
out fantasy.
That fantasy that you might have. Tell him you still want that shit. It doesn't matter how fucking nice his haircut is or how good his pecs are. If he doesn't fulfill his promises, his ass is going to the curb.
Yeah, team. Let's make history. Let's make a change. I want to leave you with this quote that I found by Horace Mann, who is a Whig educational reformer and politician from the States. It is, "Be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity."
Hell the fuck yes.
Hell the fuck yeah.
You're not done yet until you have helped make this world a better place for everybody.
That's right. And that is something that is available to us right now more than ever. This is our generation's moment. So get activated, activate your friends, and let's win one for the good guys.
So I guess that's us for this week. Check out our other episodes. Check out our clarification episodes, which come out from time to time.
If you have a subject that you'd like us to tackle, please comment, message us, email us, Twitter at us, whatever you like. It's all available to you.
Explain it to Jamie at gmail.com. Twitter is explain Jamie. We have a Facebook page. Check us out.
Shouldn't be that hard.
All right.
Thanks a lot. Explain it to Jamie.
Hey Ding Dongs, future Richard coming here from the editing booth with a little add-on. We're just going to be flipping our release schedule. So in the past we released clarifications on Monday and episodes on Thursday. This week we're going to start releasing episodes on Monday and clarifications on Thursday. So check back this Monday for our next episode on Standing Rock. See you then!